Aloha, I'm Airman Van Dyken, MD from Out of the Doldrums. Welcome back. I want to start with a question that sounds almost a little too, dare I say, bold. Can exercise help kill cancer cells? Now, before anyone runs away with that sentence, let me be very clear. Exercise is not chemotherapy. Exercise is not surgery. Exercise is not radiation. Exercise is not a magic shield against cancer. But there's a fascinating line of research that suggests that exercise may change the internal environment of the body in ways that make life harder for cancer cells. And one of the most interesting mechanisms has to do with something very simple: blood flow. When you exercise, your heart pumps harder, blood moves faster, your arteries experience more force, your muscles release chemical signals, immune cells move through the bloodstream. And if there's certain cancer cells floating in that bloodstream, trying to survive long enough to spread somewhere else in the body, exercise may make that journey a little bit more hostile. That's the part I find so fascinating. Because most of us think about exercise in terms of calories, weight loss, fitness, muscle tone, or heart health. But what if exercise also changes the terrain that cancer cells have to survive in? What if movement doesn't just train your body, but changes the battlefield when it comes to cancer? That's what we're talking about today. And one of the key ideas is something called shear stress. Shear stress, it sounds pretty boring, but it's not boring. It's one of the most overlooked forces in the body. Shear stress is the mechanical force that's created when blood flows across the lining of your blood vessels and across cells traveling through the bloodstream. In my nitric oxide video, I talk about shear stress because it's one of the reasons exercise stimulates nitric oxide production. When blood flow increases across the endothelium, that inner lining of the arteries, the vessels respond by making more nitric oxide, which helps them in turn relax and improve blood flow even further. That's the blood vessel side of the story. But here's the cancer side. A circulating tumor cell is not sitting comfortably in a tumor anymore. It's broken away. It's floating. It's detached from its usual tumor environment. So it's a single cell and it's exposed to immune cells, oxidative stress, collisions with blood cells, physical forces of moving blood. And during exercise, that force increases exponentially. So the question asked was simple. Could exercise level blood flow physically damage circulating cancer cells? In 2017, researchers published a study in Scientific Reports called, quote, "High shear stresses under exercise condition destroy circulating tumor cells in a microfluidic system," end quote. Really long title, but the idea is really powerful. So these researchers used what they called a microfluidic system, basically a lab model that can mimic blood flow conditions, and it exposed cancer cells to different levels of shear stress. They compared lower shear stress to higher shear stress conditions meant to resemble what might happen in blood vessels during vigorous exercise. And they found that high shear stress reduced the viability of circulating tumor cells. Let me say that in plain English. In this lab model, when cancer cells were exposed to exercise-like mechanical forces, more of them were damaged or destroyed. Now here's the part where we have to be a little bit critical. This wasn't a clinical trial in human beings. It was controlled conditions. So we can't take that study and say, HIT exercise kills cancer in humans. That would be just irresponsible. But it's a really intriguing mechanism because getting to metastasis is not easy. For cancer to spread, a cell has to escape that original tumor, enter the bloodstream or the lymphatic system, survive circulation, avoid immune detection, exit into new tissue, and then successfully grow there. That is a brutal obstacle course. And exercise can make part of that obstacle course even harder. I want you to picture this. A cancer cell breaks away from its tumor. It enters the bloodstream. But instead of floating through a slow, lazy river, it gets thrown into white water. Blood flow increases. Mechanical shear stress rises. Immune cells are moving, muscles are releasing signaling molecules. The bloodstream has just become less comfortable for a cell that's trying to survive and spread and metastasize. That image to me is powerful because it changes how I think about exercise. You're not just moving your legs, you're not just dancing, you are changing the physics of your bloodstream. Now, cancer cells are clever. Some circulating tumor cells can adapt to shear stress. Some can travel in clusters. Some can bind to platelet. Some can activate survival pathways. Some can even resist cell death. So cancer biology is really complicated. It's never one clean, simple story. That's why we can't treat it so easily. So the honest version is this. Shear stress may be one way exercise makes the bloodstream more hostile to circulating tumor cells, but it's probably only one piece of a much larger puzzle. And the larger puzzle is where the story gets even more interesting, because exercise doesn't only change blood flow. Exercise changes the chemistry of your blood. When you exercise, your muscles release myokines. Your immune cells, they mobilize. Your insulin sensitivity improves. Your inflammatory signaling can shift. Stress hormones change, growth factors change, metabolism changes, and cancer cells are really sensitive to that environment. They don't exist in isolation. They're constantly reading signals from the tissue and blood around them. That's why I think one of the best ways to explain exercise and cancer prevention is this. Exercise changes the internal terrain. That doesn't mean exercise gives you total control over cancer. It doesn't. But it does mean movement can make the body less hospitable to cancer initiation, growth, or spread. Now let's talk about another study that I found really interesting, especially because of my work in breast cancer surgery. A 2025 study in breast cancer research and treatment looked at breast cancer survivors and compared one single bout of resistance training with a single bout of high-intensity interval training. Researchers collected blood before and after exercise. Then they exposed MDA-MB231 breast cancer cells to that serum in the lab. So MD-MB231 cells, it's a fancy name for cells that are commonly used. They're a triple-negative breast cancer cell line, so they're often used in research because they're very aggressive and they're very invasive. So here's what they found. After exercise, the blood serum contained higher levels of certain anti-cancer myokines. So those are anti-cancer chemicals produced by your muscles. And when that post-exercise serum was applied to breast cancer cells in the lab, cancer cell growth was reduced. The reduction was approximately 20 to 29% in vitro. But again, we have to take it with a grain of salt. We have to say it carefully. This doesn't mean one workout treats breast cancer. It doesn't mean exercise replaces endocrine therapy, chemotherapy, immunotherapy, radiation, surgery, or anything else your oncology team recommends. What it means is that even one bout of exercise can change the blood environment in a way that affects cancer cells in a dish and possibly in our body. That's fascinating. One workout. It's a measurable change in blood signaling, a measurable effect on cancer cell growth in vitro. That should really make us pay attention. Because the old way of thinking was we'd basically give generic advice like, exercise helps cancer patients feel better. And all of that's true and it's really important, but the newer research, it's really asking a much deeper question. Could exercise also affect cancer biology itself? Not necessarily as a cure, not as like a replacement for treatment, but as a biological signal that could change immune function, metabolism, inflammation, myokines, blood flow, and possibly even tumor behavior. That's a much more powerful conversation. Now let's take a quick look at colon cancer. There was another study published in the International Journal of Cancer that looked at what happened when serum collected after a short bout of intense exercise was applied to colon cancer cells in the lab. Exercise bout was short. It was around 10 to 12 minutes, but it was intense cycling. Here's what the researchers found. They found that post-exercise serum changed the expression of more than 1,300 genes in colon cancer cells. 1,300 genes. Those genes were involved in processes like DNA repair, energy production, inflammation, and cancer cell growth. That, to me, is wild. 10 to 12 minutes of exercise, intense exercise, but exercise, changed the blood environment enough that colon cancer cells in a dish altered their gene expression. Again, it's a lab model, there's caveats, but it does tell us something really important. Exercise is not a vague wellness suggestion. Exercise actually creates rapid biochemical changes in our blood. Our bloodstream after exercise is not the same as our bloodstream before exercise. And the cool thing is cancer cells appear to respond to that changed environment. So yeah, I guess that's just one of the main messages I want people to remember. Exercise changes your blood chemistry. Cancer cells are sensitive. Now let's talk about the immune system. Because if we're talking about cancer prevention, your immune system and immune surveillance matters. Your immune system is constantly scanning for abnormal cells. It doesn't catch everything, clearly, but it plays a major role in recognizing and destroying cells that shouldn't be there. Exercise can mobilize immune cells, including natural killer cells and cytotoxic T cells. So natural killer cells are especially interesting because they can attack abnormal or stressed cells without needing the same specific priming that some other immune cells require. So during and after exercise, these immune cells can move into the bloodstream in higher numbers. They circulate. They go on patrol, so to speak. So now imagine your exercise environment again. Your blood flow is higher, your shear stress is higher, muscles are releasing myokines, your immune cells are mobilized, your metabolism is shifting, your inflammation may be changing. It's all one coordinated physiologic event. And that's why exercise is so powerful. It's almost like exercise doesn't just push one button, it pulls multiple levers all at the same time. Now let's make this practical, because otherwise it becomes a beautiful science story and it's fascinating, but nobody knows what to do with it. So what kind of exercise are we talking about? There's probably 3 major buckets. First bucket would be regular aerobic movement, walking, hiking, cycling, swimming, jogging, rowing, dancing, anything that gets your circulation moving and reduces your sedentary time. And yes, dancing counts. Dancing can raise your heart rate, increase blood flow, challenge coordination and balance, improve your mood, and make your movement feel less like a chore and a workout, but more like being in your body. But at the end of the day, you want to do the exercise you actually enjoy, because that exercise is the exercise you're more likely to repeat. This matters because consistent movement improves insulin sensitivity, blood pressure, blood flow, inflammation, and metabolic health. And please don't underestimate walking. Like, I know walking isn't like sexy like weightlifting. You know, that's all the hype these days. But walking is one of the most accessible anti-sedentary interventions we have. The second bucket is strength training. Strength training matters because muscle is not just movement tissue. Muscle is metabolic tissue. Muscle is an endocrine organ. So when muscle contracts, it releases myokines into the bloodstream. These myokines can influence inflammation, immune function, metabolism, possibly cancer-related pathways. Strength training also improves insulin sensitivity, functional reserve, body composition, and resilience. So for cancer survivors, strength really does matter. For prevention, strength matters. For aging, strength really matters. The third bucket is safe intensity. This is where the shear stress story becomes really interesting. So things like vigorous exercise, intervals, uphill walking, cycling intervals, rowing intervals, swimming intervals, dance intervals, pick your poison. Just short bursts of harder effort can create a stronger blood flow signal. It doesn't mean everyone needs extreme high-intensity interval training. Like for a fit person, intensity might mean sprint intervals on a bike. For someone deconditioned, intensity may mean walking fast for 30 seconds. For someone older, it might mean walking up a hill. For someone who loves dance, it might mean one song where you really let yourself move, followed by recovery. For someone in treatment or recovery after injury, it could mean supervised exercise, tailored by their oncology or their rehab team. So intensity is relative. The goal of intensity is just to get that signal going. And that can be one of the most important things in this whole video. The goal is not really to suffer. The goal is just to create that signal in your bloodstream. I think people need to hear this because cancer prevention content can become very moralistic. You want to eat perfectly, exercise perfectly, avoid this, avoid that, optimize everything, and that can get really exhausting. And honestly, it can become a little cruel, especially for people who already have cancer or are wondering if they did something wrong. So I just want to reemphasize, cancer is really complex. People who exercise still get cancer. People who eat well, who eat a pristine diet, still get cancer. People who do everything right can still get cancer. So it's not about blame. It's more about agency and, creating a difference. So blame would say you caused this, and agency says there's still signals you can send your body that can support resilience. And exercise is one of those signals. So you may be asking, how strong is the evidence overall that physical activity reduces cancer risk? Large epidemiologic studies and major cancer prevention guidelines consistently associate higher physical activity with lower risk of several cancers, especially colon, breast, endometrial, bladder, kidney, stomach, and esophageal cancer. The exact numbers vary by study, cancer type, and activity level. But I will say, the overall pattern is consistent enough that physical activity is part of cancer prevention recommendations from almost all major organizations. For breast cancer specifically, physical activity has been associated with lower risk, and among breast cancer survivors, exercise is associated with better physical function, less fatigue, improved quality of life, and in some studies, improved outcomes. But the real reason I wanted to make this video is because the mechanisms are becoming so much more interesting. It's no longer exercise because it's good for you. I mean, that's true, but it's kind of boring and generic. The more interesting statement is, exercise changes the internal environment that cancer cells have to live in. It changes blood flow, it changes immune surveillance, it changes myokines, it changes insulin and glucose handling, it changes inflammation. It may change the physical stress on circulating cancer cells. To me, that's a much more compelling reason to move. So let's get back to that original question. Can exercise help kill cancer cells? The honest answer is this. In laboratory models, exercise like shear stress can damage circulating cancer cells. Post-exercise serum or blood can suppress cancer cell growth in vitro. Exercise can mobilize immune cells and release myokines that may have anti-cancer effects. And then we also know that human population studies show that physical activity is associated with lower risk of several cancers. So yes, taking that all in aggregate, exercise may help create conditions that are less favorable for cancer cells. But I don't think we can quite say exercise alone kills cancer in the human body. We kind of have to hold both ideas at the same time. The research, super exciting. The interpretation still needs a little more data. That's how we stay credible. So let's look at the simple framework. If you want to use exercise as part of a cancer prevention lifestyle, think about this. Move most days. Build muscle 2 or 3 days per week. Include safe bursts of intensity if appropriate. Break up long sitting times throughout the day. Recover well. Sleep. And do your recommended cancer screenings. And lastly, if you're currently in cancer treatment or you're recovering from treatment, make sure, please, to work with your oncology team before you adjust or up your exercise routine. I don't want you crushing yourself, but I want you to create repeated, healthy signals. A walk is a signal. A strength session is a signal. A hill is a signal. A bike interval is a signal. A dance class is a signal. Your body is listening. And perhaps in some really real biological ways, cancer cells are listening too. So the next time you exercise, I want you to picture something different. You're not looking at burning calories. You're not punishing yourself. You're not checking the workout box. You're not earning your food. Picture your bloodstream changing, your heart rate rising, your blood flow increasing, your vessels feeling that force, your muscles releasing chemical messengers, your immune cells mobilizing, your metabolism shifting. You are changing the environment that every single cell in your body lives in. That is the power of exercise. Not because it's trendy, not because it looks good on a smartwatch, but because movement is one of the oldest and strongest biological signals we have. Well, that's a wrap, guys. If you found this helpful, I would love to hear from you in the comments below. Have you ever thought about exercise this way? Not just as fitness or a box to check, but as a way of changing the internal terrain of your body? And if you're interested in this topic, I have other videos on nitric oxide, blood flow, the oral microbiome, how exercise trains your blood vessels from the inside out. Anyways, leave a comment below. Hit like if you loved it. Please subscribe if you want to show some real support. Until next time, cherish your health and aloha.